I see some familiar, there we go, let me just continue continue the recording. So I see some familiar faces here, which is great to see. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kristen Liteplo, and I work in the community department for USTA New England. I will be your host this evening and very much looking forward to getting started. Before we get going, I want to let you know you've all been placed on mute and we are recording this. So if you'd like a copy, please let me know and I can get it to you afterwards. We have at least 20 minutes at the end, so about 20 of 8. We will have the chat box right there, and Woody Freeman, my colleague, will be looking at all those questions and we'll make sure we get to them again at like 7:40. So again, I'm very grateful to be hosting tonight's forum, and I have some amazing individuals that I would like to introduce. So first we have Mike Freed. Mike is in his 10th season at the helm of Wesleyan men's and women's tennis programs. And during his time with the Cardinals, he has led both teams to unprecedented success, including the university's first women's team NCAA championship in 2019 and a national runner-up finish for the women this year. In his 10 years, Freed has guided both teams from unranked status to consistently ranked among the top teams in the country. In 2019, he became one of 2 coaches to have ever been named the ITA Coach of the Year for both men's and women's teams. Welcome, Mike. Way to go.
Thanks, Kristen.
Next, we have Bob Dallas. Bob is in his 20th year as head coach of the Dartmouth women's tennis team and his 35th year as a Division I head coach. Under his coaching, Dartmouth has won multiple ECAC championships and Ivy League championships. Bob has also been named the ITA Northeast Region Coach of the Year and has coached 10 All-Ivy players. Off the court, the team has been named an ITA All-Academic team in each season that Dallas has coached. That means the team's great GPA, their grade point average, had to be at least 3.2. Pretty impressive. Welcome, Bob.
Happy to be here.
And last but not least, we have Jim Thompson. And Jim has been the coach at Virginia Tech for 23 years. In that time, the Hokies have made the postseason 15 times, produced a pair of All-Americans, and qualified 24 times for NCAA singles doubles field. Virginia Tech has finished nationally ranked almost every season and has had at least one player ranked in singles standings in the last 19 years. Wow, pretty amazing coaches we have here. Welcome all. We thank you for being here. So next, what we've done is we've collected a bunch of questions that we're going to ask you. And then again, please make sure everyone that's on tonight to ask your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those at the very end. So the first question will go to all of our panelists. So what we'll do is we'll start with Mike will answer, then Bob, and then Jim. Okay, so the first question goes to everyone. It's an important question that we get a lot. So the question is, tell us about the restrictions on when players can speak to coaches. I know it varies greatly depending on what division you're in. So Mike, want to answer that one for us?
Yeah, and my answer will be considerably different than Coach Dallas and Coach Thompson's, because we're a Division III school, which is significantly less restrictive with contact rules than Division I schools. We are allowed to begin communicating basically at any time via email, text, phone with prospective recruits. In certain circumstances, it's after the sophomore year of high school, but in most of the circumstances, it's even without that restriction. We can communicate in person and on unofficial visits to the campus and at tournaments before the tournament starts, at the end of competition each day. But electronic communication, again, text, phone, email at any time. And as the other coaches will tell you it's a little bit different for them.
Yes, so for Division I, on June 15th, before the start of your junior year, we're allowed to call you. We can send you recruiting materials, texts, phone calls, emails. And then on August 1, before your junior year, we are allowed to meet with you face-to-face and also do both official and unofficial visits to our campuses. So, Jim, anything I'm leaving out there?
No, I think that pretty much summarizes it. I mean, we do have a limit of how many contacts we can have with each player over the course of the time, which I think is important to point out maybe as well, but I think you covered it very well.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So the next question will go to Mike. Mike, where do players start when they decide they would like to play college and tennis? Like, how do they go about getting noticed by you?
Yeah, I mean, again, as a follow-up to their first question, Kristen, I think that, proactively reaching out to coaches is a great first step. So, we're able to respond to incoming emails at any time. And so I think that there are great resources online right now, obviously, for prospective recruits to be looking at, individual college teams and get a sense of what their lineup looks like and where they're recruiting and at what level, and whether that's tennis recruiting or USTA rankings or, UTR, which is becoming, more and more prevalent, almost every week these days, and get a sense of kind of what the level is and what the range is, and determine if they think that that's a good fit for them. They can also obviously research academic qualifications and learn more about the schools, and then reach out at any point for us, and with similar restrictions depending on the school and the division and the conference. And then as it gets later in their high school career, junior year and beyond, obviously, connecting in advance and coordinating as to which tournaments they'll be playing and coaches will be at, and then begin meeting face to face, or at the appropriate time, after appropriate conversations, looking into the idea of coming to visit the school and meet on campus. It's easy for me now that everybody has to go second and third. We have to change the order. It's not where Jim has nothing left to say after Bob goes here.
Well, I have other questions for them. Now, I am curious, Mike, and it might vary too, is how many recruiting visits can players have? Is it unlimited or is there a cap?
Yeah, again, for Division III, unofficially, you can take as many visits as you want. Our conference in particular doesn't do official visits, in the sense that what generally defines an official visit is the university is paying for travel expenses for the recruit to come to the school. And we don't do that at all. So for all intents and purposes, all our visits are unofficial, and there's no restriction as to how many and how many schools recruits can visit. Coach Dallas and Coach Thompson will tell you some of the details about what it's like for schools.
Great, thanks, Mike. If you could chime, is it 5 or I don't know why I'm thinking that. It is 5.
It's 5.
Okay. Okay, Bob, next question is, how should recruits handle themselves? I like this question. How should they handle themselves when they're on a visit to your school?
So I think there's a couple things that families want to be aware of when they're visiting schools and interacting with coaches and interacting with the players. Number one, a little bit what Mike said, do a little bit of research before getting to campus. Know things about the school, know a little bit about majors, know a little bit about people on the team, know a little bit about what the schedule of teams that you play. The second thing is, it sounds kind of funny, but make sure when you go to a school that you're not wearing clothing from another school. Nothing frosts us more than a kid, spending his whole visit wearing like a Virginia Tech hat. Okay. It's a simple thing, but again, understand that that's important. I think, again, this one's a little bit more important. When you're on a visit, try to stay off your phone. Recognize that the coaches, the players, the professors you're meeting with, the administrators you're meeting with, are interested in you and interested in explaining to you, what the school is all about. And if you're more engrossed in what you're doing on your phone, that's, a really quick way to make a not such a strong impression. And then I would say the last thing, when you're done with your visit and now you're home, send a thank you note, right? Send an email, send a text. If you want to stand out, send a handwritten note with a stamp on it and an address, and, let people know, hey, thanks for your time. Really enjoyed my visit. If you met with a professor, if you met with an administrator, you met with an athletic director, you had a student host, send them a note. Those things really make a difference. It's a great habit to be in. And it will, if you want to stand out as a recruit, that's something that will make you stand out.
That's great advice. It seems so simple, but so important. I like that. So Jim, when we were talking on the phone the other day, you mentioned about players choosing the right fit, a coach that fits their style. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it goes along with what Bob was talking about with the visits. When you go on the visit, you kind of want to, we're interviewing you maybe, but you're also interviewing us, and to try to figure out, the style of the coach, if he's laid back or if he's militaristic, if he's, what is he a stickler for details? Or I think those are really important things to find out. I think that causes a lot of friction when students haven't done their homework and then they end up going to school. I think that's why we see a lot of players that transfer. I think you can do that on the front end. You can, watch a practice and kind of gauge how the coach interacts with the players. When you're on the visit, you can talk to the players and ask the players, what kind of style is the coach? What do you like about him? What do you not like about him? So you learn more about each coach that you're visiting and the school that you're visiting.
That's great. Mike, back to you. What is the number one quality you look for in a player?
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good question, and I'm curious to hear everybody else's answers to that too. I think, for us, and I think for everybody, really, a certain level of character that includes toughness and resilience, and kind of positivity is really critical. And I guess you need to preface it, or I need to preface it by saying that when we're looking at recruits, and I think that, the three of us are looking, sometimes at different level recruits. And I think when recruits are looking at schools and they see, for instance, that, the starting lineup at Virginia Tech or Dartmouth is, pick a number, the women's team is, a 9-8 to an 11, or on the men's team at Virginia Tech, it's a 12 to 13, realistically, if a women's player is a 7, it's not a realistic fit to think that they're going to go play at Dartmouth. And if a male player is a 10, it's not a realistic fit to think they're going to go play at Virginia Tech if their 6th player is a 12. But I think separate from all that, there are definitely ways to stand out if you're within kind of half a point of that range, or you're in the ballpark right level for a school to start with. And I think that, momentarily, next week we're going to go all to hard court nationals and watch players. And to a certain extent, you'll look to see, who's got more weapons and who's got more upside as an offensive player, or maybe particularly, has the doubles component already down at a very high level. But I think that for me, much more than that, we're looking to see how people kind of carry themselves on and off the court, how prepared they are when they step on the court, how, it's always impressive to see somebody who's carrying their body language in a way that you don't know if they're winning or losing without looking at the scorecard, that's responding to lost points and unforced errors in an incredibly kind of optimistic and positive way. And for that matter, to see what's going on, in little details. Are they coming off the court and kind of immediately doing a cool down and stretching? Are they walking to the court with water prepared? Or, versus you see recruits that are coming to the court and, they're in South Florida for a clay court championship, and, it's the second changeover and they realize they don't have any water. So some of these kind of, details about how seriously they're taking the different aspects of their training and how resilient they are, because inevitably there's going to be all kinds of setbacks and adversity, on a college team, on and off the tennis court, and indications as to how well, prospective recruits are huge intangible that I think that we're all pretty much looking for.
That's great. Jim and Bob, do you have anything to add to that? That was great. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, I get to go first again. That's not fair, guys.
Jim.
Mike, you're doing a good job there. I mean, that's
I know.
exactly right. I think the way they're prepared is amazing to see. And like you mentioned, the cool down afterwards and how they interact with their parents around the tournament also is a very important, says a lot about who they are and how they interact with people, and maybe how they're going to interact with me. If they can't interact with their parents in a good way, it's probably not a good sign.
Right. You're going to be spending a lot of time together.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of second that. I mean, I think when you're watching kids play, you're looking for someone who looks like they're enjoying playing tennis. There is a sense of joy to what they're doing. They like being at the site, is something that I look for. And sort of seconding what Jim said, sort of how they treat people, how they treat the tournament desk, how they treat the officials on the court. Those are ways to really stand out. The kid who seems to be, super nice to the tournament desk and super nice to the officials out on our court. This is going to be a fun kid to be around. So that's something that does make a big difference.
It's not all about records and wins and losses, right? It's all around.
If it was just about that, we wouldn't need to recruit. We'd just see who's playing on Sunday.
Yeah. No, that's good. Bob, what are some important roles of your assistant coaches? And actually, I'm curious, I'm assuming everyone has at least one assistant coach. But tell me, what are some important roles of your assistant coaches during practice, training sessions, during your matches? You could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I've been lucky. I've had the same assistant since 2010. So for me, Dave and I just sort of work super well together. He's amazing at packing a van. It looks like he's doing Tetris, so that makes my life super easy since I just throw everything in the van. When it comes to training, it's using what his strengths are. He's incredibly detailed oriented. So he's going to make sure you're doing things 100% correctly and then being able to repeat it. Right. I sometimes, sort of see a little bit more of the big picture of like, okay, this is what your game style is going to be. But Dave's going to look at it and go, okay, well, Bob, you can say your game style is going to be that, but you're not hitting your forehand well or correctly. You can't have that game style. You're going to make sure that that's going to occur. Again, when it comes to within a match, you start to know maybe which players you interact with better on the court, in given circumstances, right? And that's something you talk about going to the match. Hey, I'm going to take this side of the building. You take that side of the building.
Mhm.
Each venue you play at is often set up a little bit differently.
Sure.
Right? At Dartmouth, we're 6 courts straight across. If I remember indoors at Virginia Tech, Jim, are you still 3-3? Right. So you got to kind of make a determination. All right, who's going to be on which side? And, you may say, all right, well, you work better with this player. I work a little bit better with this player. Let's be on that side.
Mhm.
And it's also, again, also knowing, how each of us are going to communicate with the team and the players. The assistant is a second voice of the program. and the assistant should be and is sort of saying the same things and is in lockstep with what you're doing. Because, the sort of how we're trying to get better, what type of culture we're building, or, the head coach and the assistant want to be in complete lockstep. So it's like they're speaking in one voice, but sometimes the voice sounds a little different. So,
Right. Well, you're lucky you've had them for so long.
yeah,
Great.
Dave's only been at Dartmouth for 34 years, so he kind of likes the place.
I guess so. How about Mike and John? Do you have assistants as well? Have they been on board around the same amount of time, or are they a revolving door, if you will?
Good, Jim.
I can go first, Mike. Yeah, I've had an assistant now for 6 years. It fluctuates. Most of the time, the guys that come to work with me are looking to venture to be a head coach down the road and sort of
Right.
use it as that stepping stone. But along with all the things that Bob said, my assistant for sure does a lot of the individual workouts. He's fantastic on court, and we work together, like Bob said, being a common voice. I might identify, you need to work on this type of game style, and he goes out and does that with them on the individual side. Bob didn't mention this, but so Bob must do all the paperwork, but I use my assistant to do a lot of the NCAA paperwork that is just tedious and really hard. And it's all on the computer, and he's much younger than me and really connects with the guys on the computer side of things. So he does an awesome job for me in that way as well.
Nice. Mike, how about your assistant?
Not much to add. I'm still laughing at Jim's comment there because our assistants usually the ones that show me how to unmute my phone for Zoom. Yeah.
We all have our strengths and weaknesses, So Jim, this is an important one. I feel like I get this a lot as well, being out in the field, in the community. Jim, can you explain how you use rankings or ratings to identify players?
Yeah, that's one I hear all the time. I heard it a lot at the clay courts, and it's a difficult question. I think I don't know if it was Mike or Bob that alluded to the fact that if you're doing your homework before you come to campus, you kind of know if you're a fit or not. When you're a year, maybe 2 years out, it's sometimes difficult to know how much you can improve your UTR and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of guessing. I'm very careful though when it comes to UTR. I think a lot of people sort of box themselves in and get so worried about what their UTR is that it affects them in terms of their development. And this should always be about development. If you're improving your game, guess what? Your UTR and all that other ranking stuff will go up. So you should always be thinking, how do I improve this part of my game or that part of my game, my conditioning, whatever it might be. I do think that UTR is an important tool. I mean, we all use it. I think it's very important to remember that it's a rating. It's not a ranking. And so if a guy is, say, as Mike said, an 11.5 and my guys are 12s, that doesn't mean my guy at 12 is better than the 11.5. It means they're going to have a good match. And so I think that's really important to realize. And then I think it's something you can use to look at and go, hey, I need to find better opportunities to play these guys that are higher in UTR. And that's not always easy to do. As far as rankings go, I mean, I think the rankings also are a reflection of what opportunities you've had. And so I think when you're dealing with the recruiting side of it, you don't want to give excuses for why your UTR is low. I think all of us as coaches will agree that, we don't want to hear a bunch of excuses for why it's where it is. But, maybe there is a backstory, you haven't played, you had an injury, whatever it might be. And being able to talk about that and being really honest about that, I think is really important.
Thank you. Mike, what is the number one question players should ask during their recruiting process? I mean, I feel like we kind of touched on all of it, but is there kind of one that you can think of off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to kind of give a blanket answer for that. I think it really depends on the individual person and their families as to what they're looking for. I mean, and so for some families, it may be about scholarship opportunities, and for other families, it may be, about certain academic majors or what people are doing, post collegiately. But I think one of the, kind of generically important things is to dig as deep as you can, and get a sense for, there can be a lot of schools. Generally, people are looking at schools, based on their prioritization of academics and tennis and their level of achievement in both. And so a lot of the schools they're looking at are similar on paper. This is, this kind of tier of an academic opportunity and this level of a tennis program. But the experience of going to school there or being on that team could be radically different from one place to the other. And it's based on kind of the culture of the school and the culture of the team. And I think that that's tough to kind of discern by doing a web search. And I think that talking to coaches and talking to players on the team and doing visits, obviously that whole process has been, turned on its head with COVID for the last year and a half. But I think that the question about, this experience, something that's going to resonate with me, is this a place where I feel like I'm going to fit as part of a family within the team and within the campus community. And it's tough to kind of figure that out sometimes without digging deeper.
That's great. This one might be a loaded question. Bob, what role should the parent play in the recruiting process?
So I think for the role for the parent is they should be moderately involved. And what I mean by that is the initial contact should come from the student. The student and the coach should be starting out forming the relationship. However, like, this is a big decision, and sort of the analogy I use, I don't think anyone would allow their 16, 17, 18-year-old son or daughter to go down to the car dealership and buy a new car without, a little bit of parental involvement and making sure that they're getting a good deal, that things are honest and things are above board, and, that they're getting the right add-ons and they're paying the right amount on the car loan. Well, college is a bigger decision than buying a car. So for sure, the parents should be involved a little bit on that end when you start talking about, well, how does admissions work? How does financial aid work? How much does it cost? How does scholarship dollars work? Can I, is this a 4-year scholarship? Is this renewed every year? Those are things where a parent can really say, hey, this is something that's important. When it comes down to asking more about, playing time, coaching style, the interaction with the coach, when it's time for the student and the players on the team to go to lunch or dinner, no, that's when the parents back off. So so I would say the moderately involved parent is really an effective one.
As you were answering that, I was kind of thinking of the coach. Like, what's the coach's role, their personal coach or private coach? What should their role be?
I think it's important for then the college coach and the junior coach to establish a pretty strong relationship, because there's going to be a lot of times through the year where that player's heading home and is going to be working with their junior coach again. And we're hoping we're saying the same things, right? We're not trying to reinvent things and all of a sudden, telling somebody, you know what, the sky isn't blue, the sky's red. Your junior coach has been lying to you all these years. It's sort of saying, hey, this is, we're all on the same path. We're, Jim mentioned it. We're trying to get a little bit better at our sport. We're kind of, constantly trying to get better and enjoy things. So I think working pretty closely with the junior coach is important. And I think it's a two-way street. If the junior coach has some concerns about like how the kid's playing, it's okay to do that in a respectful way. And in the same token, it's like, hey, can you work on this with him when he's home in the summer? Hey, you're going to be home for 6 weeks at Christmas time. Can you guys make sure you guys continue to work on it? This is what we've been working on. This is what he needs to do. So.
Thank you. That's great. It's a team effort for sure. We'll ask one more question before we'll pause and see how the questions are coming from the participants, and it goes to Jim. So Jim, and actually, you know what, why don't we all answer this question? Well, I won't, but the panelists will. Jim, you can start us off. Does your team work with a sports psychologist, a strength and conditioning coach or nutritionist or anything along those lines? I'm very interested to hear this.
So we work with all of those people. We have a strength coach that works with us 3 times a week. In the weight room, we have a physical trainer that's, the trainer for the team that is with us every day at all our practices and weightlifting and everything like that. We work with a sports psychologist. We have a nutritionist that works directly with our team. And I think that what Mike was talking about, when you're looking at the whole picture for what the school has to offer, these are the things that you want to be looking at, especially if you have, I need to add strength to my game. I need to put on some muscle. So what's the relationship with the strength coach or, the sports psychologist? I'm pretty good, but I always seem to fail in the 3rd set. Well, maybe the sports psychologist is helping in that regard. So we have all the different resources at Virginia Tech. And I think that's sort of pretty common and at the Power 5 schools, I would say.
Thank you. How about Mike? Do you have these types of trainers and coaches and nutritionists as well?
Yeah, we do, probably less extensively than Virginia Tech and Coach Thompson's talking about there. I think that we work with sports psychologists, but it's a little bit unique, I think, for us and amongst Division III teams to be doing that. It's less unique to be working with strength and conditioning coaches, obviously. But even that, we're working with strength and conditioning coaches to kind of put our programming together. But the tennis coaches are basically implementing and overseeing the strength and conditioning component of our training, as opposed to, as Jim was saying, the workouts are being led and everything, being specialized and run by strength and conditioning coaches, if I understood right. We're scratching and clawing to add more depth to the nutritional component of what we're doing.
Great, thank you. Bob, I saw that you unmuted. Would you like to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think similar to what Jim was saying, we do, the strength and conditioning coach runs and oversees the program. Similar idea, a nutritionist that comes in and, will work with the team at whole as a group, and then as necessary saying, hey, I'm here to help individually. Same thing with sports psychology. I think another thing that is important to kind of ask and look at is the level of academic support. Is there an academic coordinator? Are there tutors available? Is there a person there to help with study skills, class selections? And that's something that I think most of the Power 5 and the Ivies do. And then, something again, that's, I don't know how they do, Virginia Tech or Wesleyan does it. We have something called like Life After Dartmouth, sort of working on resume, cover letters, bringing in corporate recruiters that want to work with athletes, things like that. So that, that's another thing that, maybe on your visit, you want to ask about, like, what are some of the other resources that are available?
Great, good points. Well, why don't we pause right there? I know I've certainly have enjoyed this and I've learned a lot, so I appreciate it. Woody, do we have any questions there in the chat box for us?
Got a question here. This is a good one.
Great, go ahead.
Okay. How important are academics in the recruiting process? Did you hear that?
We did. Would anyone like to take that one? Or each of you, if you have different answers for us?
I can go first. I think academics are why you go to college and what you should have as a priority. Certainly, a lot of people have the perception that tennis is going to get them into school or to, and certainly I'm sure there are some recruits that can happen for, but generally the schools are looking for good academics and the right fit, just like we're looking for the right fit for our tennis program. If we have a SAT requirement of 1200 or 1250 for business, then I think if you're not in that ballpark, you're not getting into Virginia Tech. And so I think that kind of goes hand in hand. I'm sure Bob will talk about that with Dartmouth and the Ivies, and Mike as well.
I mean, for sure, the bar for admissions at an Ivy League school is really high. So you have to be very, very strong academically. You can be the best player in the country, and if your academics aren't at a certain level, it's just not going to happen. And it's not just testing, and it's not just your GPA. It's also sort of what your course load is. How many AP classes you're taking, those kind of things. Are you challenging yourself in the classroom?
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive. That I think probably from all of our perspectives, there are probably three categories that are, that are part of the recruiting process for us. And the first one is academics. And the first one is, does somebody have the academic credentials such that with our support from the tennis side, they're going to be able to get into the school and succeed there. And then the second one is tennis. They're playing at the right tennis level that's a good fit for the program. And the third one are some of these intangibles that we've been talking about in a couple of the earlier questions. But without that first piece, as Bob said, it's kind of a moot point if you can't pass that first hurdle.
Okay, I've got another question here. Do you recommend the use of player videos in communications with coaches? Player videos.
Sure. Video is an important tool. Certainly during COVID times, we got a lot of videos. We had to watch a lot of video. A couple recommendations I would make when you're making your video. Number one, if you can film from behind so we can see where the ball is going, that would be very helpful. Number two, probably 10 to 12 minutes at most. And your 10 to 12 minutes is basically a minute or two of forehands, a minute or two of backhands, a minute or so of volley / overhead, a minute of serves, and then about 7 minutes of points. And please don't edit your points. There's nothing more frustrating than receiving a video where the player never loses a point, because you're like, man, how many points did they play, or who are they then playing? If you can send a tournament match, great, because then we know, we kind of know, like, hey, this person is playing, and it's someone playing hard. Again, I've seen plenty of videos where the ball is just being teed up for the kid to look good when they start to play points. And the last thing I would add, you can leave the music out. That'd be cool. We don't need to hear any more, various inspiring music.
Bob, how long, what's too short and what's too long for a video? I know you mentioned getting a tournament, like a match in there, but you want the whole.
So if someone actually has a match, that's okay, right? Like, we're all pretty good at technology, so we know how to fast forward. We know then if it's a whole match and we want to cut, and we know it's a 4-4 match, and we want to say, hey, you know what? I want to see the starts and I want to see the ends, and I don't care about the middles. That's fine. We're also willing sometimes to watch, you can fast forward through a 4-on-4 match and watch it in about 25 minutes. And that's okay. That's okay. We don't necessarily want every video that we get to be 25 minutes, but, as I said, that 10-minute video is great if there's a bunch of points in it.
Any other thoughts on that subject? I've got another question here. Do you have any special recruit stories from your past? I'm thinking that might be somebody who might be like just a special player that came to you in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I can tell a couple for sure. Bob mentioned the thank you notes, and I don't want to tell on one of my guys, but I have Ryan Fishback and from the Eastern section, and Ryan wrote every single person, as Bob mentioned, a personal note of thanking them on the video. And that did have a huge impact. I mean, you just know that kid's been brought up right and did his visit the right way. And then I have the best story that I like to tell a lot is that I have another friend who I knew his dad. He sent me a recruiting letter, but he literally, it was almost like he balled it up and put it in the envelope. And when I got it and had to kind of undo it from the envelope, I was like, if he can't take the time to really put this in the envelope in a professional way, how is he going to be very good at what I'm going to ask him to do, which is be very professional at all the time. So needless to say, we did not get that recruit. And then the other story I would say is that, if you're, when you're going on the visits, as Bob said, you want to make sure you make a good impression. And so, wearing the right clothes, I know that sounds a little funny to some people, but, maybe doing the homework that if we're going to play Virginia tomorrow, you're not going to wear their colors. You're going to wear something a little more neutral. Or we've had kids that have addressed their letters to the University of Virginia and sent it to me. And it's like, come on, you can't make those kinds of mistakes when you're doing this. This makes a huge impression. And if you're writing a letter to Coach Boland and you're sending it to Coach Thompson, that's probably not a good idea.
That's funny.
Had more than you would think of those.
It happens all the time.
All the time. People are rushing through the process. They're sending it to both of us. Okay, we're both in the same league in the same state, but kind of take your time and get it right. It's important.
Any others?
Bob?
Oh, I don't know. I think you just remember the recruiting horror stories. Just the people who didn't handle themselves well on visits, the kid who was trying to ditch their student host, the kid who didn't show up for their exit meeting, those kind of things. So, those are all the negatives. I think all the positives are the ones that ended up coming to your school that, you've ended up having a great relationship with, and, have had an awesome 4 years at their school. And you don't sort of say, oh yeah, this is what happened on their recruiting trip. It was just sort of like, yeah, it was pretty normal, yeah, it was just normal. Yeah, they had a good visit. They were respectful. They were nice to be around.
And you actually get to know these kids for 6 years, not just 4, the 2 that you recruit them for, and then after college.
Woody, we go to a lot of weddings.
I'll bet you do. All right, here's another question. If a student has a rough start academically, but has an upward trend in grades, will that help get into good schools?
it doesn't hurt. Right? Like, again, it depends on how rough and how upward the trend is and what, what level of school you're looking at. But for sure, it's better to be trending in that way than the other way. And it's, let's be honest, it's also better to be trending, athletically up rather than down. Right? I mean, we all will say the same thing. We're not loving recruiting the kid. Well, I used to be, top 15 in the country, but now I'm 50. I used to be 100, but now I'm 50. All three of us are going to recruit the kid who's used to be 100 and now is 50, as opposed to the 15 who's now 50. Unless there's some amazing story.
Have you had some diamonds in the rough like that? Kids who have come on real strong, either academically or on the court? Last minute kind of surprise you?
Jim, Mike?
I'll jump in. I mean, I feel like we all do, and part of the recruiting process is to try and kind of sniff out those diamonds in the rough, which is obviously easier said than done. But yeah, I think we all probably have stories at the appropriate level, But for us, it's the quote unquote mid 3-star kid coming in who was playing one by senior year ahead of the 5-star kids, and I think that it happens, and it's incredibly gratifying when it does. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to predict. If we could predict them, we'd all be recruiting the diamonds instead of whatever. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, my best recruit ever was ended up being an All-American, and honestly, if I saw his recruiting video before we signed him, I would have never recruited him. I mean, he came really highly recommended from a friend of mine and a coach that I trusted, but once I saw his recruiting video, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, and he ended up being an All-American and 235 in the world ATP. So he ended up being okay.
Wow. What was the video like? You have to share that with us. What do you?
Well, he had lots of the music that Bob was talking about.
Oh, gotcha.
He did a little bit of air tennis where he wasn't even hitting the ball. He was just sort of demonstrating his strokes in the air. He was way out of shape. I mean, he was not in very good shape. I mean, I think that was, when we talked about the nutritionist, they took him down from like a 23% body fat on the men's side, which is unheard of, down to 13, which is still high for my team. I would say that's pretty high still for the standard of our team, but that made a big difference. He went way up in the rankings. So you never know. It's really hard to predict. And I think as recruits, I would share with you, don't take it personally if some coach, passes over you or doesn't pass over you, whatever. Just keep looking for the right fit for you. And it's out there. There are lots of good schools and lots of great coaches.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any gems to offer, wisdom for these youngsters? We are out of our chat box questions. So any last thoughts?
I throw out there, just follow up on what Coach Thompson just said too, is that, sometimes or maybe all the time, the whole kind of college planning and recruiting process is stressful. And the key is to try and look at it from the standpoint of how much work you put in to put yourself in position where you are talking to coaches and looking at schools that are going to be academically great fits and the opportunity to play tennis in college. And there's a right fit for everyone. And sometimes you go into the process, with tunnel vision that these are the schools, or this is the single school that if I don't get into, I don't have the opportunity to play, it's a failure. And the fact of the matter is there's so many great schools and so many great opportunities that it's so, it's so painful to see so many families and so many kids so stressed out by the process, when in theory it should be really exciting. And it's going to work out. It may not work out at the place you thought as a freshman would be your dream school, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work out at a place that becomes your dream school. And I don't know, to try to take a deep breath periodically and recognize that you've done a whole lot to put yourself in really good positions, and you're going to find a place that's a great fit for you, because it just happens. There's so few instances of somebody, starting this process and ending up on the street. You end up at a place you end up loving. So good luck.
Well,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Woody. I didn't mean to-
we did have one more question come in. So for
Okay.
our people out there, let's ask it. Given the COVID-19 made it difficult to compete and rankings and ratings may have dropped, will some leniency or understanding be given?
I mean, I think in recruiting, you're always looking at people in bands. You're not sitting there going, I'm only looking at, this kid or this level. You're looking at a band of kids in that level. And you're gonna go out and watch people play and sort of say, okay, this person can help us, this person can't help us. Because, I mean, Jim touched on it a little bit, right? An 11-5 and a 12, a 12-2. Those are, can be very, very similar. And it doesn't mean the 11-5 isn't going to beat the 12-2. It's the ratings and rankings are a snapshot in time. It isn't the be all and end all. So yeah, I mean, I think all of us look at the player and sort of what their history is. Again, it has to be within a ballpark, right? Like, as Mike mentioned, hey, you're a 7 UTR and you're looking to play on Jim's team. It's not going to happen.
I think it's important to say too that even if you're talking about just UTR, it's a fluid process. Like, I don't know what you guys think too, but I feel like the periodically the UTR shifts its algorithm and it skews things. So that 11-5 now could look very different than what 11-5 a year and a half ago was, or what 11-5 a year from now might be. And so if you get too hung up on that, it's almost a moving target. And yes, to the question, because of COVID, everything's changed. I looked the other day, I was filling out a form for something and it asked, our team's kind of power 6 UTR, and we didn't have one. There weren't enough results from the kids on our own team to have. So there's a lot going on now that's atypical, but even when it is typical, as Coach Dallas just said, it's the range is important, but if you're in that range, the tenths of a point, and the small margins are largely insignificant.
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. Before I let you all go, any other last minute tidbits and advice you'd like to share, or are we good to go? Thumbs up. All right. Well, on behalf of USTA New England and all of our players and parents, we want to thank Mike and Bob and Jim for your time. I know you're all extremely busy, and enjoy the rest of the week, and good luck to you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for
Good
having
night,
us.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Good to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.